Hi, it's Dr. Michael McNeil here. As you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. I was thinking, shall I record this up in the dark studio or shall I be in the sunshine? So I've chosen the sunshine. So I'm pleased to announce that my second book has just been published. That's the reason I haven't been doing anything, because any new videos just about, apart from clipping little bits of other people's videos, is because I've been working on this book, which was originally a 2016 Masters Thesis when I was doing my philosophy and religion masters, and the at the time uh, the my supervisor actually said, "You really need to get this published. You should really." He said, "This is really good," and I wanted to, but I just didn't know how to. And I just didn't have the time at the time because I was working full time and I was doing that course part time. I just didn't know what to do. And then after I'd finished my doctorate, sort of like a couple of years ago, I got the one of the guys that had really helped me with it, the professors who had really helped me with it, said you should get this published, and he recommended the publisher, and uh, and and so great. I managed to get this one published with the same publisher, so I had to give a good overhaul and update, and it was proofed, and the proofreader did a really good job sort of finding out, because it's quite controversial in parts. So because the content, when you think Dominion theology, that even sounds it's a bit like when people talk about fundamentalists, and if they say dominionists and stuff, it's just a pejorative, it's just an insult to somebody. So I'm pleased to say it's actually on. Uh, it's actually, if I look that way, yep, because it's paying, because it's capturing it in the recording here. So it's on. It's available Kindle. The Kindle price is actually pretty good. You can see it's only like £7.41, and it's a good Kindle, good quality Kindle. It's got sort of like the links, and it's got the index, and it all works. It's good. Uh, the uh, Obviously, I've got no control over the pricing, but what I can do is, because I still think I think it is worth that. I mean, it is due over, it's 220 something. What does it say? It's 220 pages long, and it is really rigorous. It's not just uh, it's accessible enough that anybody who's interested in the subject of how does Christianity interact with politics, and how do politics and faith, is religion supposed to be a private thing, in the sense that was very much the Enlightenment position, wasn't it? Sort of, you're free to be religious, but it's something for the private sphere. It has nothing to do with the public sphere. Just keep your religion in the closet somewhere and don't let it interfere with your life. And this book is like the antithesis to that position. It's saying everything about your life has to be centered around your faith. And it says about but it is a real practical challenge, is how does that faith then work itself out? What principles do you use? Does that just mean every time you go into work, before you have a meeting, you ask everybody, all your colleagues, to bow your head in prayer or something? Is that what it means to be a Christian at work? That's probably going to get you, probably when you try and go for lunch and sit with anybody, they're probably going to run off if you do that, unless you're working in a place where most people are Christians, and even then people might still be uncomfortable with it because they'll just think this guy's a fruitcake. And so, because and so the book is very much exploring, how do you how what's the theology, what's the philosophy, what's the philosophical basis for, because Calvin talks about, doesn't he? He says our purpose is to create Christian philosophy. And so the book is very much written in that, from that perspective of Calvinistic philosophy, of Reformed theology, of the idea of the Reformers, was that because pre the Reformers, people would separate off the church hierarchy, if you like, the priesthood, from the laity, from the commoners, and they would argue for the preeminence of the former. So the priests and everybody were more important than any other vocation that there might be. Whereas part of the Reformers, the great thing about the Reformers, back to sort of like the idea that the vocations of life are equally as important as, if you like, full-time ministry. That's one of the arguments I really make, is because people often tend to phrase it and say, "Oh, now I'm going into full-time ministry," as if that's a superior sort of like vocation of life, that God's finally called them out of working for Pharaoh, and now they're going to be, working in the full-time vocation. Now, I will say that for some people, that is exactly what happens. They prove themselves in the business realm or whatever realm they're actually working in, and God does call them into, with what they've learned, into working within the ministry, however that may be. Just like, I work full-time for a Christian ministry now. And so, but I'm doing a technical job within that ministry. I'm not sort of like a preacher in that sense. I'm working, I look after the website development, technical things. And so, it's trying to counter that sort of like idea that somehow the most superior vocation of life, which is very much a medieval Catholic idea, isn't it? And people go and shut themselves off in a monastery. And there's lots of mystics who are still like that, the communing with God is the most important part of your life, rather than actually getting down into the nitty gritty of, right, how do we deal with the corrupt politicians, and how do we create some sort of political platform on which we stand, or how do Christians, because historically there's been Christians in all sorts of political parties, and you think, well, how possibly, how could you be in, say, if you're an American, you could say, how could you be a Christian in the modern Democratic Party, because they've gone full commie. And we've got the same problem here, our Labour Party, where there was a lot of contact historically with socialism. And the ironic thing is that a lot of the early, what people might call egalitarian ideas, where socialists tend to be very, very egalitarian, which egalitarian is just another word for equality, and considering people of equal value and equality between different people rather than different classes of people, and the people being discriminated on the basis of those classes. And there was a lot from the English Civil War of egalitarian movements that emerged underneath Oliver Cromwell within what was called his New Model Army. And a lot of those ideas were incorporated into the trade union movement, which was almost completely taken over by the Labour Party and the Socialists, and the influence of Marxism in the early 20th century. So there's lots of these. So you can have, that's the thing, you can be, there is points of contact where people who emphasize various parts of the gospel, whether we consider the social gospel as a legitimate movement or not, that was a view that of redeeming, very similar in some ways to the thematically, at least formally, to dominion theology, in the sense dominion theology is arguing that all the different parts of society, all arts, music, humanities, science, whatever those aspects may be, all those are in need of redemption, and of Christianity working the details. Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, very famous evangelical preacher of the 1970s in the UK. I think he died at the maybe the mid 80s, but he was all the way through from the 1930s to 1940s, all the way through until I think he retired in the early 1970s. Then wrote some of the most amazing commentaries. But one of the things he says is that the role of the Christian within society, whether they're in politics or whether they're in a profession, is to understand how their Christianity applies in that particular domain, and to work it out in details. He said it's not there, because our view, especially in the circles that I've been in, people, even if people now accept the legitimacy of going out into these various domains, the reason why they're going out into those various domains really is just to be evangelists. They're just they're a musician, so they're going to go out and play music to evangelize other musicians. Or they're if they're going into politics, it's because that means that they can have contact with politicians, and therefore they can do evangelism. It's a bit like when you're at university. So like, go to the university as a student, you join a Christian union, and what does the Christian union tend to do? It tends to be a means of outreach to other Christians within the university. Whereas something Lloyd-Jones was saying was, really, when you're doing that, and you're really falling into, you're confusing what the church is compared as an institution. The church's job is to evangelize, and is to go out into the community. Whereas if we're in a profession, our job as professionals is to understand how and to work out in detail how does my Christianity and Christian principles apply to the operation of my profession. And that's really what this book is about. It's really sort of like digging into, it's trying to lay the foundations of a Christian philosophy, but it's looking sort of like historically at why would Christians reject uh, uh, being involved. What's the principles of that? Because and you find that's tied very closely to eschatology, which is the if you like the study of the last days. And if you believe that that we're just about to get out of here because the rapture's just around the corner, you're not going to be concerned about building the foundations of society. All you're going to be concerned about is evangelizing and if you like, providing an ark and loading up the Noah's Ark of the church, because we're getting out of here, And so you can see, even in that simplistic sort of presentation there, that your idea of what's the purpose, what's the domain of the church, is the church, is the world doomed just as Peter says, to be burnt up in fire and consumed in fire, and that's just about to happen? If your view is we're just about to be raptured and get out of here, then yeah, that's the way we are. If we believe, say for example, that we're supposed to reform the entirety of society, and then when Jesus comes back, Jesus is coming back for a victorious church and for a culture that's transformed and changed throughout the world, and that the church has conquered and gone throughout the world, you're going to have a very different view of how we should live your life. And that's really what the book, if you like, in one sentence, is saying, right, if in a sense my eschatology governs, I believe in a triumphant eschatology. I believe Jesus is coming back after the church has conquered, if you like, every nation and every tribe and every tongue, and the church is strong and triumphant throughout the earth. And so when Jesus returns, it's like his coronation. Now that's what's called a post-millennial sort of eschatological view. And so that means that every aspect of society and every whether it's art, sciences, whatever it is, they all have to be transformed as part of that process. And so that's really what the book's about. So I'll be going through the chapters in more detail, but I'll put the link. So the book is actually there, because I've got it on the screen here, but I have to look at it because I can't read it there. But I will put the links to the book there, and I will be as well. I've actually have it on my blog as well. I've got sort of like on my blog, sort of like talking a little bit about the book, and this is really a copy of the Facebook post, to be honest. But there'll be details of. Eventually I'll actually have, like with my previous book, I'll have like an HTML, a scholar's version, so that they can copy, because there's nothing worse than when you buy the Kindle, and then you're trying to copy and paste into the thing, and you've got limits, and then they don't allow you to save it anymore. It's really, Kindles are becoming a bit awkward to use. Amazon's really trying to lock you into their ecosystem. So there'll be plenty of stuff on the site that will be used, which allows you to access the book. There'll be a full HTML version on there. Might be slightly different than the printed one, because there were some corrections, I think, at the last minute during the indexing, but it's like going to be 99% the same. So that's that's the update. So thanks very much, because there's been lots of people that have been supportive of the project, and so I encourage you to get a copy. The only thing I will say is that I'm happy personally. I'm going to get a personal stock of these, and I'll be happy to send them to anybody for the price of the Kindle plus whatever the postage and packing case, because I understand that 23 quid for some people is a lot, and I'd much rather this gets out here, gets out. So please, if you're a student, or if you're in some sort of library, or in some ways you'd love to read it but you can't because of you just can't afford it, please contact me, and I will ensure that you get a copy. Okay, so God bless. Thank you. Watch out, there will be a series on this on the book. Okay, thank you. God bless. Bye.